What's going on, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Mish. This week's episode is inspired by a podcast that I listened to. It was the New York Times The Daily. Nick sent it to me, and he's like, you need to listen to this podcast episode. And I was like, all right, let me look at it. So I look at it, and the title is Marriage and Sex in the Age of Ozempic. So immediately I'm like, that's a major crossover in the Venn diagram of things I like to talk about. Cool. So I start listening to it. As I'm listening to it, 2 or 3 of my clients send me the same episode, and they were like, you have to listen to this episode. Never in my life have I listened to a podcast episode and felt so compelled to respond, because while they did such a beautiful job of highlighting a new problem and that a lot of people are experiencing because so many people are on these weight loss drugs, or people in general who have just lost a lot of weight, they did such a beautiful job highlighting this problem that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. But if I was listening as somebody who is struggling with this, I would feel so seen, but I also would have been like, okay, but now what? And I think it felt that way because they were very good at addressing the symptoms and recognizing the symptoms, but I don't think they ever truly were able to identify or address the underlying problem. So if you want to hear the original episode from The Daily, which I highly recommend, I'm going to link it in the show notes. I believe after a couple of days, you do need to pay for the New York Times subscription. I pay for it just so I could listen to it again. It's worth the listen. If this is something that you actively struggle with, it's worth the listen. So I'm going to briefly summarize the episode here, and then we're going to kind of like go point by point. So in the episode, they say that they talk first, open up talking about the GLP-1s and the phenomenon and how there's this perception, I'm going to say perception because I'm going to address this later on, of all of these people that could not lose weight before. Now all of a sudden they're able to lose weight. And the reporter was saying that she was particularly interested in how the GLP-1s affected a marriage, especially when one partner is taking them and the other partner is not. So they found this one couple that agreed to interview. They interviewed anonymously. I believe they used their middle names. The man's name was Javier and the female's name she was going by Jean. And they were talking about their relationship. So they met when they were in high school. Both of them were overweight. He was a football player. I think they said he was like a linebacker, so like a bigger guy, like very secure, very like they did make a point to, she made a point to say that very like masculine. This is important. We're going to come back to this later. And she was very overweight and very insecure about her body. And because of that, they had a crush on each other, but it never really happened. Fast forward, they both got married to other people. They got divorced, and they went to their 20-year high school reunion, and they saw each other, and basically like sparks flew. They ended up sleeping together. They ended up dating. They ended up getting married, having kids, having a whole family. Their lifestyle, they went out, they had friends, they had a wine cellar, they enjoyed eating, like all of these, they had this whole life. And then she started the GLP-1s. And then when she started the GLP-1s, from his point of view, he's like, she changed. And then from her point of view, she's like, I changed. She was like, I no longer really liked going out. I no longer really liked, drinking. And also their sex life completely fell apart. And apparently sex was a big part of their relationship previously. But on these GLP-1s, she perceives herself as having no sex drive. And they did touch on, well, okay, is a side effect of the GLP-1s lower sex drive, but there's actually a lot more evidence, which they did bring this up, to support that GLP-1s increase sex drive. So what's going on in this relationship? So the way that the podcast ended, she went back and she interviewed them, and they were basically like, she's like, yeah, listen, like I am so proud of myself for losing the weight finally. Our relationship is fine. It's good. We still don't have sex. I don't want to have sex. I just don't want to. And he's like, I'm willing to be patient with her, but it sucks that she doesn't want to have sex. So like, what do we do? And that was sort of how the podcast ended. So on the surface, what seems like is happening in this relationship is a woman has started this GLP-1 drug. She has lost weight. She is now in a new body. All of a sudden, her relationship is falling apart. Can the GLP-1s be responsible for the sexual dynamic of couples? That's not really what's happening, though. What's actually happening is that a woman has found a mechanism, a catalyst, to change a lifelong problem, a lifelong belief that she had, that once it was changed, completely changed how she felt about herself. That caused an energetic shift in her that changed the energetic dynamic of their relationship. The relationship just lost its polarity. Polarity, I'm going to read you a formal definition so I don't mess this up here. Polarity refers to the natural energetic contrast between two people that creates a sense of attraction, aliveness, and movement within a partnership. People are dynamic beings. We're constantly growing, we're constantly changing, but in a relationship, in order to maintain attractiveness, or in order to still be attracted to your partner in the way that they're experiencing, you need to maintain that polarity. This is something that I think so many people go through in relationships at one point or another, and you might experience it as like we're growing apart, but it's fixable. You just have to solve for the right problem. When we blame it on menopause, when we blame it on the drug itself, when we blame it on all these other things, we don't have a path to finding a solution. So what I want to address in this episode is how that energetic shift happened, how polarity was lost in their relationship, and then what they can do to get it back. All right, so in order to connect some dots here, let's dive into the pathology of like how a person gets to this place. In reality, she just changed, she leveled up. It happens to all of us. All of us should be growing and changing, but knowing how to grow and change with your partner is what prevents people from feeling like roommates or feeling like they're growing apart. So I'm going to break this one down specifically with weight loss and specifically with the GLP-1s, but you can apply this to any time that anyone levels up in anything. When someone's been struggling with weight their whole life, and especially the way that she describes her confidence, at some point, probably from her parents, she was told or taught that how you look is tied into how you should feel about yourself. And you're not worthy because of your weight. And you're only worthy of love if you're a certain size. And most people then, and she does say that she did this, will overcompensate throughout their life because they don't feel worthy. They don't feel good enough. They feel something is wrong with them because they struggle with weight so much. Now, what's going on in the background, if I tell a human that they're not supposed to have something, they're going to really want that thing. Like, think about it this way. In high school, you didn't like the guy or girl that liked you. You liked the guy or girl that didn't like you, right? Until they liked you, and then you didn't really care anymore. Or the example I like to use with my clients sometimes is, if we have a kid that's, like a normal teenager and they're like 19, they're going to like drink whatever, whenever, as much as they can, just because like they're not supposed to do it. And then by the time like you're 21 and a half, like it's not as exciting anymore because you're allowed to. So you're a child, you're struggling with your weight. You're told that there's something wrong with you because of that. So now you're like, oh no, there's something wrong with me. I have to fix it. I shouldn't be eating these things. I can't have these things. All of a sudden, we're making this connection in our brain that like, ooh, that's kind of exciting. We're not supposed to do it. Ooh, not to mention that food in general can definitely trigger dopamine receptors in the brain. So junk food in general can do this, but it gets heightened when you've created this dynamic in your brain by wiring your neurons together that like, oh, I'm not supposed to do this. Like now food's on a pedestal. Like now if your dopamine receptors on a scale from 1 to 10, we're at a 5, now they're going to be at a 12. But the interesting thing is you trained it to do that. So in theory, you can train it not to do that, which we're going to come back to that later. So you don't need to do this through GLP-1s. I'm just giving you the background here of what's going on. But if you're told your whole life, you can't have it, you can't have it, you can't have it, you can't have it, it's on this pedestal, right? And then you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, why don't I have willpower? Well, there's no such thing as willpower. Willpower is not a real thing. People who don't have willpower just don't have a difficult relationship with food. Like food doesn't mean anything to them. Maybe something else does, but they haven't assigned that meaning to food. Maybe it's alcohol, maybe something else, but food doesn't do it for them. So some people, if you struggle with this, you're looking at people and you're like, well, how come she can have 5 French fries? She could have 5 French fries because French fries don't mean anything to her. She's never assigned a meaning to them, but you have. But because you've assigned that meaning, you can take that meaning back, which artificially is what the GLP-1s does. It suppresses the parts of your brain that trigger those dopamine receptors. So whereas like you might have trained your brain to give you like a 12 on a scale from 1 to 10 with dopamine, the GLP-1s will scale that back to a 5. It works on other mechanisms too, but like that's the main one. When people say like, oh, it lowers the food noise, what they're really saying is like, I don't get the same high that I did before. Now, if we take the GLP-1s away, unless you've done some work on yourself, your brain's going to go right back to that 12. But it's something but that's the fear of people who are on the GLP-1s, like, oh no, I don't want to gain the weight back. Well, it's because that you haven't ever fixed the right problem. You have been dieting your whole life, which is a form of restriction. So you're restricting your whole life, which is exacerbating this, oh my God, I'm not supposed to do this, I can't have it. So now food has this like incredible meaning in your life. And the only real way to lose weight and keep it off is to knock it off the pedestal. Now that can be done through the GLP-1s artificially. The problem is when you stop taking them, like, you're stuck where you were before. And it takes longer, you can train your brain to think differently about food. You can start knocking it off a pedestal. You can start allowing yourself to have it and going through that process. And that's what I've been doing with clients for years. It takes longer, but it sticks. But the problem is that whenever we're talking about weight loss in this country, we're dealing with it from the wrong problem. We're dealing with it as a willpower problem. We're dealing with it as a like, oh, I don't know what to eat problem. For people who really struggle, especially people who struggle their whole lives, it's a mindset problem, and nobody's handling it like a mindset problem. The GLP-1s, though, where they got it right, they do deal with the mindset. It just makes someone dependent on it. But if somebody their whole life has been like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? I need people to love me. And how could somebody possibly love me in this body? And I have no willpower and I have no control. If that's somebody's real life experience, what are they going to do to get love? They're going to overcompensate. So they're going to be the good girl. She actually talks about herself like a good girl. She says, I was a good girl at work. I always did what I was supposed to do. And then when she gets in this relationship with Javier, the funny thing about it is she and Javier both had a crush on each other when they were in high school. But she was like, there's no friggin' way. How could he like me in this body? Like, how could he like me? But he did. But she couldn't fathom how it was possible because her confidence was so low, because she was taught she's only worthy of love, at a certain weight or looking a certain way, that she didn't even fathom it. So they go to their 20th high school reunion. They got married, they got divorced, whatever, other people. They go to their 20th high school reunion, and there's like still that like spark there. And the other thing that's interesting is she describes him when he was in high school as a football player, which this is going to come in important later, like big, masculine, like it felt like good to like have that like masculinity around it. So to fast forward, they're at their 20-year high school reunion and there's still sparks there. And they go on a couple dates and they sleep together, and they both describe it, and they both describe it differently. Javier said when they slept together, he was so turned on by like how uninhibited she was in her body at that time. She was like in his mind, she was so free. She was so herself. She was so confident. She says, I don't remember it like that. I was so self-conscious. I was not comfortable in my body, but I couldn't friggin' believe that this guy actually liked me, that I was so happy. I was so in the moment that like, I had the best time because of it. And he experienced that as being uninhibited. She said, I was still self-conscious, but maybe for a minute, I couldn't believe this was happening. I was in the moment, and it just felt so good that was his experience versus her experience, also going to be important for later. So they have kids, they have a great life. Now, the problem is that when your entire life, you've been always afraid of not being good enough, and you feel like you're unworthy of love because of your weight, you're going to very likely become somebody who is a people pleaser, because that's how you're going to get people to like you. Because in your mind, you're like, well, they're not going to find me attractive. Like, so I need to like overcompensate. So my own wants and needs don't matter. I just want to make you happy because like I'm this way. So like, this is my only tool in my toolkit. I want to do what you want to do. So for a lot of people that I work with who struggle with food, they tend to be people pleasers because they're trying to be like, she even calls herself like the good girl. Like, I'm trying to be the good girl at work. I'm trying to overcompensate. I'm trying to like get people to like me. So everyone else's wants and needs become their wants and needs. And sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not, but they really experience themselves as being happier when the other person is happy. A lot of times people like that aren't even in touch with their own wants and needs are. So fast forward, she goes on the GLP-1s and they're like living this life, right? Like they go out drinking with their friends, they go out partying, their sex life is great. Like they like to go out to eat. Their life is like very centered around like this like entertainment thing. And then she goes on the GLP-1s. Now, the way it's described in the podcast, it's almost as if, and I'm sure there's an aspect of this where she's just like not comfortable in her body. So she's trying to figure out her new normal. There's a little bit of an illusion too, but they don't like hit on it hard enough, in my opinion, of she says that, well, we used to be out till midnight, but I wanted to go home at 10 o'clock, but I felt like I couldn't I felt like I couldn't voice that because that wasn't what Javier wants to do. So I couldn't voice my opinions when I was a certain weight. But now that I'm a certain weight, now I'm worthy. So now I could start saying the things that I want to say. So the biggest problem that I think needs to be like hit on the head with a hammer, they alluded to it, but I think it needs to be like out there, is that there was a belief that she had that she was not worthy of love at a certain weight, and her opinions didn't matter at a certain weight. When she lost the weight, that belief system, well, now I'm this weight. Now I'm worthy of opinions. Now I am worthy of love. Now I am worthy of all of these things. So I'm going to voice that I don't want to be out this late. I'm going to voice that I don't like all of this stuff. I only liked it because you did, because that was how I received love before. Like I didn't feel worthy of having my own opinions and my own voice, but now I am. She goes on to say that people started treating her differently at work. She's like, well, now all of a sudden I wasn't getting all of these forward facing jobs, and now I am. And she's attributing that to her weight. And I'm sure there is an aspect of that. But I also want to challenge it a little bit, because you can see just based off of her ability to now vocalize her own opinions and identify her own wants and her own needs for herself, that there is a possibility that the energy that she's putting out there now is quite different than the energy she was putting out there before. It's possible that people are treating her differently because she is more palatable, if that's how she's experiencing it. But I think it's a lot more likely that she feels like she is more palatable. I feel like she feels like, well, now I'm worthy of being in these rooms, and she's putting out this energy and she's putting out this confidence. I would challenge the idea that it's strictly based on how she looked, and I would challenge her to consider, is it because you believe that you are worthy now, so now you're carrying yourself differently and you have this confidence? If you were to somehow be able to have this confidence before losing the weight, would you have been in those rooms? I think there's a strong possibility you would be, because, and I've talked about this in other podcast episodes, confidence is the number one most underrated attractive quality. And I like to use guys as an example for this, because I think guys pull it off better than women do for a million different reasons, societally based mostly. But, I'm sure we've all had this experience where like there was a guy and maybe like aesthetically they weren't pleasing for whatever reason, but they had this great personality, this great confidence, this great energy about them. And because of that, it made them so much more attractive. Or like vice versa. Like I could think of one friend I have. She's drop dead gorgeous. But she has no confidence. So she reads like really beautiful when you first see her. But once you start talking to her, like the attractiveness, the magneticness, like it's just not there. But it has everything to do with how they're feeling about themselves and the energy that they're putting out there, not necessarily just people judging them about the weight. There is an aspect to that, I'm sure. Please don't misunderstand me. But I also think that we don't give enough credit to the power that we have within ourselves to have confidence regardless of how we look. So then they get into their sex life and they're saying how like they never have sex anymore. And they're sort of attributing to her that where she's maybe not super comfortable in her body yet. So like he doesn't have access to it. And he's kind of saying, I liked her old body. I liked that she was like voluptuous and this and that. Like I was attracted to that. But I don't think, again, they're talking about the right problem. I have a feeling that she always thought that sex was for someone else. When somebody is a people pleaser, and when somebody thinks that they need to receive love and acceptance, what they get really good at is anticipating everybody else's needs and reading the room through everybody else's lens. And as a female, when you're having sex, it's impossible, I think, to have good sex if you're so in your own head. Now, if you're in your own head because you're self-conscious about how you look, and then you're in your own head because you don't know how to relax and turn your brain off and enjoy sex, then sex in general is not going to seem enjoyable, because you don't know how to enjoy it yourself. You only know how to like think about how you're looking to the other person and how they're experiencing you. You're never turning your brain off and you're never experiencing that enjoyment within yourself. So when she's saying that she doesn't want to be touched and she doesn't want any of that stuff, I think there's a strong possibility that a piece of it, not the whole thing, but that there's a piece of it there where she maybe doesn't really know how to enjoy sex not through the lens of somebody else, just like actually for herself. Now, they said that they went to this therapist, and I hated the exercise that this therapist gave them. They said that the therapist said, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to lay down fully clothed, and your partner's going to touch you everywhere but your erogenous zones. And you tell them like it's like green light, red light, basically. And Javier liked the exercise because he's probably like, all right, cool. Like I'm getting like a little bit further with her. I'm getting a little bit closer. I'm getting a little more intimate with her because she just feels like just not accessible. And she's like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good to me. Well, of course she doesn't like it. Of course it doesn't feel good to her because she's lying there, probably still in her own head, being like, all right, he's touching me here. He's touching me there. I don't like it, blah, blah. She doesn't know how to relax and be in her feminine and enjoy sex. Now, I am making some assumptions here, but for the most part, I'm pretty sure I captured some of what her transformation that she has gone through has looked like. So you can see how her belief system about so many things has changed and how she's like experiencing everything so differently now, including her relationship. So when we're talking about polarity, which is where that sexual attraction comes from, it's where that spark comes from, it's where that whatever comes from, like they had it before because their dynamic before, remember, he was like the football guy, right? So automatically, I'm going to say masculine and feminine because that's what it's called, but it's just anyone can have masculine energy, anyone can have feminine energy. It doesn't matter who has what. It's just that both needs need to get met by the couple. If two people, for example, are in their feminine energy, it's going to feel like roommate vibes, kind of like what they're experiencing now. So remember, he was like the football player, right? He automatically had that like masculine thing. He made her feel safe, made her feel chosen. That's going to create a very polarizing relationship. Part of their dynamic sounds like there was a level of validity that he gave her because he's like, I'm choosing you. I love you. She didn't feel worthy. So she needed that validation from him. As she lost the weight, as her mentality changed, as she started giving that to herself, she no longer needed his validation in order to feel worthy. At the same time, from a masculine point of view, he was leading the relationship, and she was happy to follow him because at the time her value centered around like people pleasing because that was the only tool that she had. Now that she doesn't need that anymore, she's looking at where she's being led, and she's like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel right to me. So you could see just by her beliefs changing how that masculine, feminine, or opposition dynamic, that polarity changed. And that's why they're experiencing the lack of chemistry, the lack of sex drive, the kind of like mundane relationship that they're describing. People tend to mistake this kind of like energetic evolution for incompatibility, like we just don't work anymore. But it only dies when people stop trying. So I could kind of hear it in his voice. He was sort of like, well, like I'll do whatever she needs, but like I need her to tell me what she needs. Like I need the blueprint. And then he was sort of like, I'll give her the space to like figure out her body, but like it just kind of sucks. Like, no, like you need to stay grounded and you need to stay still and you need to be like, we got this energy. Like you're changed, you're different. I still love you. I'm still here for you. Like, let's figure this out. There was in his response, and like I feel for him because I can only imagine how it must feel just feeling like you miss that person so much, but she's still there. She just needs you to energetically meet her where she's at. So she needs to feel like, listen, we don't have all the details figured out yet, but like I got you and I got this and we're going to be able to do this together. And then watch her soften. What's so interesting to me is that this is sort of a common phenomenon, not through Ozempic necessarily, but when couples just start to kind of feel like roommates or like the sexual attraction goes away, or you have two people in the household that just feel like they're competing with each other, like no one's in their family. Like the energy dynamics play out so often in relationships, and yet we don't talk about it ever. We never talk about when energy shifts. We talk about, if you go to like therapy or couples counseling, they'll talk about communication. We'll talk about boundaries. We'll talk about compromise. If you have a good one, maybe you'll talk about values and those aligning, but nobody ever talks about recalibrating your energy. Energy sounds like woo-woo to people, but everybody feels it. Everyone experiences it. And it was interesting to me that like they had this whole episode about it and everyone was like, well, we don't know what to do because it's not a traditional problem. It's a very common problem that people face, but it's not a common problem that we talk about. And every time I do a podcast episode on, we'll call it masculine and feminine energy, or on energy dynamics in relationships, especially like the Jersey Shore ones that I did, people are so drawn to them because it's so relatable, but nobody talks about it. So I hope this helps anybody who is listening that might be experiencing something like this in their relationship, or if you've experienced like something very similar with, weight loss or let's say you got a college degree or a better job. Like there's so many things that can cause this shift in relationships, but being aware of it and understanding that it's not necessarily two people outgrowing each other. It is something that can be fixed if you guys are both committed to it. It's a recalibration. That's the best way to describe it. So in the case of Jean and Javier, it's an incredibly challenging situation. She probably feels really bad because she's like, well, I've changed and I love who I am. This is who I've wanted to be my whole life. But who Javier fell in love with was somebody who was outsourcing a lot of the validation and a lot of the things that she now is able to get internally. So now Javier has to energetically level up, so to speak, in order to figure out what her new needs are and be able to provide and meet them so that he can then be nurtured by her. I think if they look at it like that, they absolutely have a chance of mending and repairing their relationship and even getting to a level that they didn't have access to before, because Jean is a stronger person now. So if Jean is a stronger person now, and now it forces Javier to level up and become a stronger person, it's going to make their relationship a lot stronger. If they can do that, they would possibly even be a stronger couple than they were before. But it's really important to have visibility on what the actual problem is, in my opinion, at least. It's funny, I literally have one friend from high school, and that one friend happens to work at the New York Times, and I may or may not have begged him for the host and the producer's email address so I could get this message to them, because I really feel for them, and I hope this podcast reaches them, and if it does, I hope it resonates with them. And I hope it resonates with anybody who might have ever experienced any sort of transformation within themselves and experienced a shift in their relationship. And sometimes when you deal with it from the root of the problem, not just sort of playing with the symptoms, you can actually mend the relationship and come out stronger. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, you can DM me on Instagram at Mish_mindset. I'll link it in the show notes, and send me your questions. I'll address them on the podcast as well as the stories. You can also email them. This is a new feature, guys. Not that email's new. It just never dawned on me to let you guys do it before. You can email me now at michelle@mishmindset.com, and I will choose one of your questions for the podcast next week. All right, everyone, have a fab week. I will see you next Thursday.